Greetings. All right, so we're going to be doing part 2 about the Pleiades. This has been a real fun trip because this part that we're focusing on with the Pleiades was a recent thing, and it happened right around the time all the discoveries and leaks about the pyramids. And again, it's wonderful, but also I feel like it's always been in our faces type of thing. So I'm going to do several things. I'm going to pick up where we left off on part 1 of the Pleiades, their many names, and their link to time, and include some bit out of the Women's Encyclopedia of Myths and Secrets by Barbara Walker around the Pleiades. And some of it is rough, but also important. And then a little bit into what I mentioned, the Blue Light Sisterhood. I don't know where I saw that, but anyways, we'll get into that too. And then more. So thank you for being here. This is very exciting. Okay, so where I left off with you all on the last video was talking about the moon goddess cults before the takeover, okay? And so I had ended with talking about that. And the moon goddess cults before the takeover were Hecate, Artemis, Selene. We have selenite, which is related to the moon and named for and after the moon. Or for Selene, which is Greek, but originally from older Anatolian Thracian cults. I need to ask about the Thracian cults. Ninhursag, Inanna, Ishtar, and those are Sumerian. Nut and Hathor, Egyptian, cosmic and lunar. Ixchel, Maya, moon, fertility and medicine. Anat, Astarte, Leviatine, goddesses, later merged or demonized. These cults were intergenerational, lunar-based, matrilineal, and highly ceremonial. And they often used dreams, star watching, and menstrual synchronicity to track time. And they also shared a color, blue, okay, relating to the moon goddess cults, okay? So we'll move into the Blue Star and Blue Light Sisterhood, and they could be linked to the Pleiades, but here's what we know about the Pleiades. In multiple traditions, they are called the Seven Sisters, Mothers of Time, or the Watchers. Okay, and so I asked about the Mothers of Time. And this one comes from the Quechua peoples and the Aymara peoples of the Andes. So this is Peru, Bolivia, and Ecuador, where the stars are not just seen, but listened to. The Pleiades is the mother of time, the Andean traditions. So the Quechua people, the Pleiades are also called Quoloqua or Quolqua, Qollqa, or Quoto, and are often referred to in myth and ceremony as Mama Quoto, the star mothers. These celestial mothers are deeply associated with time, weather, crops, and the fertility of the earth. The story and the ritual. Each year in the Andes, the heliacal rising of the Pleiades in late May or early June signals the Andean New Year. And this is why I got into this, because we were talking about how people say that March is our New Year, and then others say that April is actually the true New Year's. The story I heard about April Fools was that was the true birth of Yeshua, or otherwise known as Jesus, and that changed. But I actually think April Fools goes back to the Great Mothers and the removal of them and their time keeping. Anyways, okay, so I'm just saying, we're finding out from this research, I'm finding out from this research, that all over the planet, different people had different New Years, but they were predominantly based on the Pleiades, Orion, or Sirius. Okay? This event is not an astronomical marker. It is a living communication with the star mothers, these events, and the Andean New Year. When the Pleiades rise, elders and farmers gather in the mountains to watch the clarity or blurredness of the Pleiades. If the stars appear bright and clear, it means that the coming year will bring abundant rain and good harvests. And if the stars are dim or hard to see, it means that there will be drought, hardship, or need for preparation. This watching of the mothers was part of a larger cultural ritual cycle. Offerings are made, songs are sung, and the people adjust their planting schedule, livestock movement, and even naming of children. And this started making me think about also corn, because we will see the symbol of corn around the world as well as one of the main crops. And my theory is that we were agricultural before we became completely sedentary, because some of these time-keeping messages from the Pleiades could include migration, like this one says, even, or need for preparation. And sometimes maybe that, not sometimes, maybe, but sometimes that was migrating to somewhere where maybe it wouldn't get flooded, or maybe they could plant their crops. This, even if naming children, okay. And then the mothers are speaking. The people say the mothers are speaking. Time has returned. The new year is born. The Pleiades activate guardians of Earth's rhythms. Okay, why they were called the mothers of time. They birthed the year through their return. So the New Year's was based on the Pleiades. They watch over time, not like a clock, but like wise women tracking cycles. They weave together the stars, rains, soil, and human ceremony into one story. They are ancestral, often believed to be the origin point of certain lineages, especially those connected to female bloodlines and herbal wisdom. And here's something wild that aligns with some of the things we've spoken about. In some versions, the Pleiades are said to be where the grandmothers fled, when the masculine gods brought war to the earth. From there, they watch, guide, and sing over the earth, waiting for the time when they'll return to be remembered by those still listening. Okay, so then we go into global remembrances. So before I go into the global remembrances of the Pleiades as watchers and mothers of rhythm, I'm going to read about the Pleiades from the Myths and Secrets, because it all ties in. And that Myths and Secrets books talk about rabbit holes, pathways and stuff, because I also got into the left hand, and I feel like I spoke, two things. I did speak about Ptolemy before because in the video I did about Artemis. Because it's somebody else who had wrote about her military capability. This was the true actual Queen Artemis that existed on this planet, who according to the teachings, may she rest in power, Mama Zogbe, that all queens were sibyls, but not all sibyls were queens. And so it was a writing of somebody else who was there during the time we talked about how wonderful she was, and then it was Ptolemy who was like, no, she's anyways, we don't like Ptolemy, any of these. So, and I'm learning just like, sorry, bing, 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 the Women's Encyclopedia of Books. So I started reading about the left-hand path, and I do feel like I talked about somewhere magically, maybe I took the video down, but something to do with marriage and like the magic of the female. Well, that is part of it because it's the left hand, and the left hand is considered female. Anyways, I went down that rabbit hole last night. Not rabbit hole, but women's remembrance guidance through this amazing book. Because also there is a chapter, or a writing here about the planets. Oh, man. And then I really want to go into the part about Osiris, which I keep mentioning, but we haven't read about it. Okay, so here we go. Because, it goes like this. I started with the Pleiades, and I was like, oh, well, what's before the Pleiades? Oh, planetary spheres. So I'm just going to read the first part of planetary spheres. Just the first part. Okay? Planetary spheres. The Pleiadian astrological cosmology was generally accepted throughout the Mediterranean world in the early Christian era. According to this cosmology, the Earth lay under a series of nested, inverted crystal bowls, turned independently of each other by star angels. Star angels. This idea accounted for the independent movement of sun, moon, and planets against the fixed stars. Each sphere had its tutelary deities. In Egypt, these were known as the 7 heavenly midwives, emanations of Hathor, who guarded the 7 gates of heaven. Soul-seeking entrants must address them with Haku, words of power. Okay, so I'm glad I read that. And I do feel like somewhere in here it talks about how... Anyways, I wanted to share that part. All right. Now, the Pleiades. Okay. The convoluted symbolism of the Pleiades, or 7 sisters, suggests an extremely archaic tradition. The importance attached to this small group of dim stars seems out of proportion to their apparent insignificance. And this is what I'm talking about. Like, what? When you start learning. Okay. The sacrifice of the Mexican savior Epitotec, our Lord the Filleted One, took place on the Hill of the Stars at the moment when the Pleiades reached the zenith, or the most powerful or successful place on the night of the great year cycle. It was thought if the 7 sisters were not propitiated, which means to regain or win favor or venerate, by the sacrifice, the universe would fall to pieces and the world would come to an end. This is based on venerating the Pleiades. Pre-Vedic Indian also attached sacrificial significance to the Pleiades, called Seven Mothers of the World, or the Kritikas, raisers or cutters. There were also 7 priestesses who judged men. A cognate was Greek kritikos, judge, and sometimes critically. So kritikos, this is where critical comes from, were critically wounded them, or sometimes critically wounded them, for their razors were, I can't say the word, but were moon sickles. We'll just say that. If you have the book, please look it up, because it's, it's a big word. The fire god Agni copulated with the 7 mothers while they were on their moon cycle. The usual tantric rite later outlawed by the Vedic priesthood. They gave birth to a solar hero enveloped in a great red cloud, the female symbol, penetrated by bolts of lightning, the male symbol. The hero was sacrificially removed, wounded with a spear, and from that wound sprang that being's reincarnation, and then another hero like himself would emerge. And this is certain rites of great antiquity, predating the discovery of fatherhood, when blood was the essence of generation. So many of the stories, like we heard, you just hear that story, wounded in the side with a spear, and then from his body sprang his reincarnation. Is this where the story of made from his rib comes from? But it's actually the Pleiades, relating to the Pleiades. The Pleiades are prominent in early cult of Aphrodite, who was supposed to have given birth to them under her name Pelion. Aphrodite was a, let's see, maybe I can break the word up. This is the same word as before with the moon sickles. Casts smerading. Okay. Cast smerading goddesses or crones. The crone goddess Aphrodite was also known as that. The Casmerating crone goddess. As well as the holy dove. And the Pleiades were a flock of doves. They were connected with sacrificial New Year ceremonies in Greece, as in Central America and Southeastern Asia. The 7 sisters stood at the zenith, again, the most powerful or most successful point in the sky, on New Year's Eve, as if to select the god of the new eon. Old Babylonian texts began the year with the Pleiades. So, this is so important. I think this is so important, and I feel like it is big news, even though this news has been around for a long time. Okay, excuse me. Okay. Later, with the Pleiades. Later, the zodiacal sign of the New Year's became Aries, the ram. So I do think that there's some, Aries starts in at the end of March. So I think that there's a link to the Pleiades via the system we see today, because I read that first part about the planets on purpose, okay? And then we're talking about the 7 sisters. So I'm having completely different theories starting to show up, but still a link to the 9. Anyhow, okay, so The Pleiades were prominent in the early cult of Aphrodite, who was supposed to have given birth to them under her name. Oh, I already read that. I apologize. Okay, so a flock of doves. They were connected to the new year. Alabama, the ram. Okay, Aries, the ram. Became replaced with. Egyptian texts allude to the Pleiades' archaic significance as Kittikas, judges of men, assigning them also to 7 planetary spheres as the 7 Hathors. So assigning the Pleiades also to the 7 planetary spheres. So this is my part of my theory. The reason why I mentioned that again, and that it's in here again, is because, is this where we actually came up with the 7 days? Are the 7 days based around the 7 Hathors, the 7 sea stars, the Pleiades? And then because we've heard many, many times how similarities had to be given, and I had done a whole video also speaking about Mary and the goddess. When it came to religion, they had to include the goddess. Many people would be happy to refuse their own god, but they were not willing to give up their own goddesses. So in order to kind of help the Gregorian calendar settle in for people, was it actually based off the 7 planetary mothers, the Hathors, the Pleiades. And there are some 9 sister stories, but they're very few, and I have to do a little bit more research, but there are a few. Okay. The dead had to speak the names of the goddesses to pass their critical examinations and enter paradise. And then there's kind of like an ode to them, basically like what they will do to make sure that they get their passage with the sisters and with those goddesses, and enter each of their names. And it's kind of violent, so I'm not going to repeat it. But basically at the end of it is like, the end of it is, I know you and I know your names, therefore know ye me, and even as I know you, your names. And the reference to, because one of the references is like tearing out the heart, is indicative of certain Aztec religious customs. The 7 mothers who make decrees appeared also in Arabia as 7 sages, or imams, which is ima for mother, right? Ima. Or plural for mothers, imams. In classical mythology, the Pleiades represented the Maytime feast of life and the November feast of death, and opposite points of the year. Are you ready for this? You ready to find out about Halloween and All Saints Day? There were emanations of the mother goddess, who was worshipped at the 2 solstices as goddess of alternatively, as the goddess of alternatively life in death and death in life, and who early in November, when the Pleiades sent the sacred king to his summons to death. Prayers for the dead were received before the Pleiades on November 1st, which became All Souls Day or All Saints Day or Halloween. Did you guys know that? I didn't know that. You should see in here I have exclamation marks, big stars next to it. Like, I knew there was a link to Halloween, and I think this is why the pumpkin is so used, because it represents a womb. A pumpkin is actually very good for helping to heal the womb. I have theories around that. I've done a video on that. It's I'm sure it's a few years old. Okay, continuing. Thanks for listening to that. Okay, continuing the Pleiades. Greeks said the leader of the Pleiades was the dove goddess Alcyone, or the Halcyon, bird who brought good weather for the planting season. Another Pleiad was Electra, mother of Dardamas, legendary founder of Troy, whose name is still preserved in the Dardanelles. Another Pleiad is Merope, bee-eater, a title of Aphrodite's queen bee as devourer of the drone. Some said Merope was one of the Furies. Others said that she married the doomed sun hero Sisyphus. Did that Pleiad, Merope, become Beelzebub? In relation to like the bee eater and devourer and a fury? I'm just wondering, maybe. Because they, where did they get all those? They created them, so. Others said that, okay, still another Pleiad is Maya, spelled M-A-I-A instead of M-A-Y-A. Maya, the maker, or the grandmother, mother of Hermes, the enlightened one. As her Hindu counterpart, Maya mothered Buddha, the enlightened one. Okay? Classical writers seemed anxious to disguise the real nature of the Pleiades. One story insisted they were all virgins. Orion, the hunter, tried to grape them, but Zeus protected them by turning them into doves and placing them in the heavens. The story was obviously absurd, as all the Pleiades had husbands, lovers, and 3 of them had mated with Zeus himself. In earlier myths, Orion the hunter was their victim, not their attacker. The huntress of the 7 stars, Artemis, shot him to death in the sea, suggesting that the victims were sometimes riddled with arrows, then consigned to the deep. Artemis personified another set of 7 stars, the much larger constellation Ursa Major, also what we know as the Big Dipper. The great she-bear, who may have been another version of the 7 sisters. Artemis and Aphrodite both were associated with ancient cults in the 7 pillars of wisdom, 7 mantric priestesses of 7 gated Thebes, and where the 7 Hathors once ruled, where sacred kings were taken every 7th year, and where Tiresias was castrated and lived 7 years as a temple woman. The same magic 7 were called 7 midwives in Egypt and the Orient. They were probably represented in pre-patriarchal Jerusalem by the holy menorah, 7-branched candlestick, symbolizing the 7-fold menhora, or moon priestesses. Menses, right? Men belongs to what are now called women. Menopause, menses, menore, just saying. As shown by its female genital decorations, lilies and almonds, Exodus 25:33. Medieval superstitions betrayed fear of groups of 7 females, perhaps a relic of ancient images of the sisters. East Frieslanders believed that if any family of 7 sisters, one of the 7 was sure to be a vampire or a werewolf. The sevenfold grouping could also be arranged in a vertical line of descent. Example, the ubiquitous belief that the seventh daughter of a seventh daughter was always a witch. And it ends there. And then Pluto afterwards. So we're going to do Pluto really quick because it's super short. Okay. Riches. Underworld consort of Persephone in classical myth. And earlier Pluto was not male but female, a daughter of the Cretan earth mother Rhea, one of the Titans or elder deities. She was apparently the second person of the original Demeter Trinity, also called Rhea, comprising Kore, the virgin, Pluto, the mother, Persephone, the destroyer. Riches typically meant the mother figure whose chest poured forth abundance. Later, Pluto was masculinized, and in Christian times, he became synonymous with the devil. I mean, they're just always doing that to us. Doing that to her, doing that to the mothers, doing it to the Pleiades. We're turning around. I'm turning around. We're turning this around. Not anymore. Okay, so continuing. Thank you for listening to that. Now we move into the groups and the global remembrances of the Pleiades as watchers and mothers of rhythm. So, this is how it goes. The Pleiades was living maternal beings who came to keep rhythm, protect ancestral memory, and guide ceremonial life. The Hopi. Among the Hopi, the Pleiades are associated with feminine principle, winter ceremonies, ancestral presence. They are called the Kahom. Kahom. The Kahom. Or Kahokum. Kahokum. Do you hear it? I'm hoping y'all hear it. The Hopi believe the Pleiades are where their ancestors originated from before coming to Earth through the Sipapu, the emergence portal. The stars are aligned with their ceremonial calendar, especially the Kachina cycle, which honors beings from the stars who come to teach and restore harmony. The Pleiades appear at dawn during the winter solstice, making a time of deep rest, visioning, and rebirth. The stars are considered watchers. They watch over Earth and ensure the ceremonial cycle is upheld. Some Hopi elders say, when we forget the stars, we forget who we are. Is this why they moved us away from the stars? Is this why they moved us away specifically from the Pleiades? Oh my goodness sakes. Okay, Aboriginal Australians. Excuse me. Dreamtime story, The Seven Sisters, or Sisters. This is from Australia, but it is much more than a star myth. The Seven Sisters, the Pleiades, stories are told by dozens of different Aboriginal groups with nuances depending on the landscape. The sisters are usually fleeing a male pursuer, often Orion or a trickster figure. The stars are guardians of sacred women's sites, singing the earth into being as they travel. These stories are part of song lines, spiritual maps that connect the land, the stars, and human history. One elder from the Anagu people said, the Seven Sisters are always watching. When we sing their story, the ground remembers how to breathe. The first time I read it, it didn't make me emotional, but it's making me emotional right now. These stories are often restricted to women's knowledge and were once only passed through initiation. Japanese, Subaru. We've talked about that. The Japanese called the sisters Subaru. Unity, sisterhood, and seasonal shifts. They mark the rice planting season and watched closely by farmers and shrine keepers. The Shinto lore, divine female spirits, kami, are often linked to these stars, and the blue light of Subaru is seen as a gentle guide and ancestral connection. Some older Japanese folk traditions say that Subarus are the sisters who braid time. They keep the world from unraveling. The Andean peoples of South America. Okay, this is kind of circling back to the South American roots in this star matrix, because, my theory is that this is where the world began. My personal theory is that it's the Grand Canyon. My mind is opening up to the possibility that if it was the Grand Canyon, that tree had to be huge. We were probably huge, and like going to places from, also if you think if you're a giant, like walking from place to place or even crossing oceans and rivers would be easy. Wouldn't it be much easier? Okay, so the Andean people. These are specifically related to the Quechua and Aymara peoples. The Inca considered the Pleiades as the beginning of their ceremonial year. They are sometimes called Las Mamitas, the little mothers, or Las Vejijas, Las Vallejas, the old ones, depending on the community. The Inca cosmology, okay, I'm just going to repeat that because I broke that up. The Pleiades are sometimes, by the Incan people, called Las Mamitas. The little mothers are Las Vallejas, the old ones, depending on the community. In Inca cosmology, the Chacana Andean cross was used to align with the stars and the solstices, tying earth rhythms directly to Pleiadian movements. Ceremonies like Inti Raymi, Sun Festival, and Quayular Riti, Snow Star, are aligned with stellar returns, especially the Pleiades and Sirius. In Quero teachings, these stars are seen as watchful guides, especially for women and agricultural cycles. Okay, so, side note. Did you hear the name in Inca cosmology? The Andean cross is called Chacana, like Shekinah. I think that's too coincidental, I'm just saying. They're saying that there's no linguistic link, but if we're starting to recognize that certain indigenous groups within the Americas were writing Hebrew, and we have links to the Olmecs and the Toltecs, this is where I was like, maybe it's not the Grand Canyon, like maybe it is South America, maybe it's more like the Amazons. Maybe the Amazonian forest, maybe that was much bigger. I don't know. There was a giant tree somewhere. I'm pretty convinced. Maybe there was more than one. Maybe the tree in the Grand Canyon was all the land. Anyhow, interestingly enough, that we have that word for, okay, linking it all back to the Hebrew possibility. So, where did Hebrew come from? And why do we have a word like Chacana for the Andean cross, the star alignment, right? And then we have Shekinah. And then also Shekinah is the feminine spirit in Islam, in Hebrew. So could it have come from the Incan language relating to the Pleiades? Just curious thoughts. I think yes. Personally, I think yes. Okay, so the Pleiades are mothers of rhythm. They are also linked to the planets. They are also linked to the Hathors. Their color is blue. There are stories of tears being shed from the Pleiades. I'm going to go deeper into that in a different video, but there are also stories that people from the Pleiades gave creatures such as the whale and the dolphin. So it's just incredible, the links to the Pleiades. Okay, so I even asked about Shekinah. So Shekinah, which is the Andean cross, symbolizes the bridge between worlds. Upper Hanan Pacha, middle Ke Pacha, and lower Uku Pacha. It's a portal, a cross of time and space, and it is deeply aligned with the star wisdom, often anchored to the Pleiades in ceremonial use. Shekinah, in Hebrew mysticism, represents the divine feminine presence of God, often described as dwelling in the earth, appearing as light, or hovering near the ark or certain spaces, or sacred space. Okay, just to clarify, but they both represent sacred feminine presence. They both act as connectors between realms, and both are linked to star portals and earth-based sanctity. Both are silenced or mystified under patriarchy. So maybe. Okay, now, Chakana or Kila, and we've talked about her, Mama Kila, Kwecha for moon. So it is possible there might be may not be a direct connection, but a parallel remembrance. Okay. Now, just to kind of recap the moon goddess cults, Hecate, linked with the crossroads, time, and thresholds. Artemis, lunar huntress and protector of the wild. Selene, embodiment of the full moon, later merged into Artemis and Hecate. And Ishtar and Inanna, and Ninhursag, the Sumerian mountain. Okay, and then they will talk about the Incas also, where there were some ceremonial places in regards to the Pleiades, there was always included an Apu. Okay, so that's going to lead into something, because if the planets have been made patriarchal, if the Gregorian calendar is very patriarchal, if astrology as we know it today was created by Ptolemy and Pope Gregory, patriarchal, right? And also very colonialized. So it's these remembrance and these, I feel like, moments for me where this is what Great Mother wants to help us remember, because these were the true timekeepers. This was what we did, and how the story's been taught to us, like how we were all nomadic, and then once we became agricultural, things started shifting. Well, it sounds to me like we have been agricultural for millennia, for millions of years, thousands upon thousands of years, and taught by the mothers, not just physical mothers, but the mothers of the sky. All right. So I want to talk to Blue Light Sisterhood. I don't know where I saw it. It was either on a YouTube short or Instagram short. And then talked about this ancient sisterhood called the Blue Light Sisterhood. This is what came up when I asked about it. The Blue Light Sisterhood is a remembered circle of interdimensional timekeeping goddesses aligned women. So, are we creating it? Did they always exist and we're remembering? That's how I feel. Originated in connection with the Pleiades, Sirius, and the Blue Star systems. They are responsible for holding timelines, protecting sacred knowledge, and guiding planetary awakening. They're often seen in dreams or visions, and they represent a council of healers, midwife, oracles, and star keepers. Are the Sibyls, the Hathors, Cybele, we've already talked about that. This is all Maya, stop it. This is, to me, this is like groundbreaking news. Along with like what's happening with the pyramids. It's really cool. Okay. And so, and then there's a blue light frequency origin. And blue is often associated with truth, clarity, divine communication, and feminine power. It is also the color of lapis lazuli and also a big color in labradorite. And labradorite, there's not a lot of writing about it in history, but it seems to be another ancient stone that was used for many magical things. Okay, but lapis lazuli is also known in many ancient groups and represents royalty, protection, and cosmic light, and is connected to the Pleiades and the full moon. The Pleiades and Sirius are both often described as blue-white stars and are linked to oral traditions, to female guidance, ancestral remembrances, and timekeeping. Now here's another fun one. Sirius has a reddish light, and the Pleiades have a blue light. Oh, squirrels. That's what the dog's barking at, squirrels. Now, if you take blue, so one thing is, you'll see this in the Native American culture, red, white, and blue, which are the Pleiades, Sirius, and Orion. Specifically the Pleiades and Sirius, red, white, and blue, because Sirius is known to have a blue-white star and also a white-red star linked to the female guidance, right? The blue light is not just a color, it's a frequency. And then you take blue and red, you put them together and you have purple. And you take the red of Sirius and you take the blue of the Pleiades and you have the middle Orion, the origin, the birthplace, the connection of the two energies. Side note, theory. Okay, and then here are some possible links to what people might be considering the Blue Light Sisterhood or the echoes of this type of sisterhood. So you have the 7 Hathors. There were goddess sisters who watched over births and destinies and even represented by a star. Some believed in the Pleiades. So each of the 7 Hathors were also represented by the stars. So it would be interesting to hear their names, okay? The Kogi mothers in Colombia. The mamas teach that Earth is watched over by a council of ancient female spirits in the stars. The Greek Pleiades, originally independent goddesses, later softened into muses or passive sisters, but their presence was always the blue priestess codes. Daughters of Sophia, or the Shekinah. Mystical Judaism and Gnostic threads. Beings of light who preserve gnosis and descend in cycles. Then we have in Hopi the blue corn woman, a sacred feminine figure tied to star wisdom, cycles, and sustenance. So, all of this, here's what's going to happen. I'm going to do another video, but it's going to be for members only because I've been trying to figure out. I've been monetized for a while. And I was so excited about it. And then I was like, well, wait, one is a lot of my time has been kind of focused elsewhere, and I'm trying to work through some things. Like, I'm in school right now and dealing with some major personal things. But I feel like, oh my gosh, it's just the weirdest thing. So on this path of the 9-moon calendar, recognizing, how the stories don't quite match up with what we're learning about the goddesses, and then you look at time, and that's what started it, was the equinox and stories about us having wrong New Year's. And I started thinking about it and how all these monoliths and buildings are to these different stars, and they don't match with astrology. So what I'd like to do is, for members only, create videos and moon, so it will still incorporate the 9-day weeks, because it will incorporate the 9 planets. Okay, it will incorporate each moon phase, because this is something we can see the moon phase, and it will be focused on the Pleiades, Artemis, aka Orion, and other names. I'm gonna find other names for aka Orion, and for Sirius as well. Other Ishiamela. Well, Ishiamela is for the Pleiades, but for Sirius, Wadjet, Osopdet. I want to pay attention. I notice the stars going on here. This is what we used to use, our own eyes to see the Pleiades. We can see our own eyes with Orion. Oh! And, okay, before I go, there's a whole link to Passover. The Pleiades, Sirius, and Orion. Because, do you know that Orion's upside down until it comes to the west? Right? Because he's upside down. And then also, right now, in certain parts of the world, Sirius is setting and will come back up in about a week. Sirius, right? And so we have Orthodox holidays based on the stars. Not the planets, both, all of the above. And so I come back again to my theory that I think that there were sibyls, priestesses, maidens. Somebody was studying just the moon. Someone was studying just the Pleiades. Someone was studying just Artemis. Someone was studying just Sirius, just the Big Dipper, just Polaris. You see what I'm saying? And putting it all together, because, yes, I'm going to give you the details about Passover. Give me just a moment. I'm so excited. It's so over the place. But, okay, so relating still to this video, the red, white, and blue. Red is Sirius, white is Orion, and blue is the Pleiades. Okay, and you will see that in the Americas as symbols. I think that's a hint. Okay. Passover. Passover's roots, a spring ritual of liberation. Passover, Pesach, commemorates the Israelites' exodus from Egypt, a story of liberation, bloodlines, and thresholds. It is held during the full moon of the Hebrew month of Nisan, which usually falls around the spring equinox, a key seasonal transition, celebrated globally by many ancient cultures. Remember, full moon. So we're having a full moon right now, right? So Passover is beginning. The ritual involves the lamb. We all know what happens with the lamb. Marking thresholds with blood and eating unleavened bread. All symbols found in much older agrarian and lunar goddess rites, like the menstrual cycles, the fertility goddess Inanna, Hathor, and Isis, goddesses. Okay, so Scholars say, or pre-Christian, pre-Yahwist layers. Scholars believe that Passover is likely evolved from two separate ancient spring festivals. A nomadic shepherd's ritual involving lambs and blood, basically, pastoral goddess origin, and agricultural grain festival, matzot, unleavened bread, linked to barley harvest and renewal. There were seasonal rites honoring life and death cycles and most likely tied to the moon and star phases, if not directly. Okay? The hidden Pleiades connection. The Pleiades were used across Mesopotamia, Canaan, and Egypt to mark seasonal transitions, planting the harvest. Canaanite goddesses Anat, who predates Yahweh's worship, and warrior fertility goddesses associated with spring, blood, renewal, and possibly stars. Inanna's descent to and resurrection, which also occurred during the spring equinox, has parallels to liberation and rebirth. Okay? So, and then it says that while the Pleiades aren't overtly linked to this tradition, cultures surrounding the influencing early Hebrews thought it did use the Pleiades as a time of sacred rituals, death, blood, and renewal. And Passover mirrors many of those themes. Okay, so is there a seasonal event involving Orion, Sirius, and the Pleiades that corresponds with Passover? And the answer is yes. There's a strong case for that, especially with ancient sky observations. So Orion begins to disappear from the evening sky during the weeks around Passover, March, April. Orion begins to disappear from the evening sky. He sets earlier and earlier, becoming fully visible by late May. His passing over the western horizon happens earlier each night. This is literally a Passover moment. Ancient cultures saw this as a death or descent. He has completed his seasonal arc across the sky. So we've heard the story in relation to December and Christmas time. But with we heard the story, but we don't, it's different for our side. Sirius is also descending and will soon disappear from the night sky. It goes completely invisible for a period only to reappear and helical rise in early to mid-July, which was the true New Year for the Egyptians and may link to an ancestral reckoning. And then with the Pleiades, what's going on with the Pleiades right now is the Pleiades are still visible just after sunset, but also moving lower in the sky. By May, they will vanish from the evening sky. This disappearance was seen in many indigenous cultures as the mothers going underground, a signal to prepare Earth. Okay, and then the descent of the sky beings. It marks the moment when Orion, Sirius, and the Pleiades pass over the horizon out of view into the underworld, into the seed time. That might be the true Passover. That might be what we're actually, these stories have been linked to help people become kind of structured, right? So just throwing. And then the Hebrew calendar is lunar stellar, okay? And so for them, this could be linked to barley harvest or spring equinox, the full moon that follows the first moon after equinox, which is when Orion and Sirius begin to fade, passing over. Okay? So, all of that to say that I am going to begin a members only group. I will have another shorter video kind of giving details. But that's where I'm going with this. And in that, it will be a women's ancient memory. It's going to be called the Crone's Bow, a remembrance of the Great Mother's star technology and star intuition and star knowledge. It sounds to me like I have been so misled, especially when it comes to astrology and the things the things that I have associated with the individual personalities. Oh, and my sister posted something about, I took a snapshot of it, about one of the stars right now, and I feel like it really links to what's going on. Oh, Eris, the goddess of discord star, has been recently discovered, was discovered in 2005. So all of that is re-embracing our traditional intuitive knowledge, noticing the stars. So it will be a together thing where I will share with you the positions of the Pleiades, what's going on with the Pleiades, Sirius, and Orion, what's going on with the moon, what cycle we're in. I'm going to use the 9-day weeks, the 3 9-day weeks for Maiden, Mother, and Crone cycles of the moon. And right now we would be doing Mother because it is the moon cycle time, full moon, when most mothers are showing their menses. Right? This is usually what the full moon brings. And each moon phase, each week moon phase, each week's star connection and planetary connection. So I was going to completely remove the planets, but after learning about the 7 Hathors, their connection to the planets, the Pleiades and their connection to the planets, and I agree that my theory is correct, that we paid attention to the Earth and all the planets, not just some of them, and even the connection to Pluto. So my video about the classes or not classes, but the sharing of this information around the stars as a collective kind of participatory thing here on YouTube will be much more detailed and better described. But the idea is to bring in and remember what we really did, what we really used to do, and who we were connected to. And it sounds like, from what I'm learning, around the world, it was the Pleiades. I mean, it's pretty fascinating. Okay, so before I go, thank you for listening to this nice long video. We're going to talk about Eris, the goddess of discord. Eris was discovered in 2005. She who demoted Pluto from planet to planetoid. She gives major collective consciousness. She gives major collective unconscious energy, particularly as it relates to feminism. So wait a minute. She who demoted Pluto. I don't understand that part. Well, that's what it says. I'll have to do... Oh, is she that big of a star, maybe? Well, I'll have to do a little more research on that, y'all. Eris has been in Aries since 1920, they say. The start of the women's suffrage movement. And she's new to astrology, so we're still getting to know her. Some folks feel that she's about decolonization of minds and spaces, feminine and queer rebellion, racial justice, global collective movements, and reclamation of indigenous wisdom. Okay. I mean, I still like Pluto. You're still a planet to me, Pluto. But I will do some investigation on Eris and find out about her stardom goddessness, because that's what this is about. It is about decolonization, undoing patriarchy, and reclaiming our true mother indigenous knowledge. I'm excited. I hope you join me. All right, before we go, instead of the guitar, we'll do little singing bowls. All right, until next time, take care.